Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be going through another economics worksheet. Section 1, the first question asks us to define opportunity cost and give one everyday example. So if I had to define opportunity cost, I'd say opportunity cost is the next best alternative you miss out on in an economic decision by acting rationally. So in economics, what this means is we assume that any person that makes a decision will be rational, so they choose the option that has the greatest utility for them or whatever's best for them. So we can say that the second best option is what we describe as the opportunity cost of. So what you're missing out on by picking the best option, that is what we call opportunity cost. So an everyday example, as we're told to give, could be if you choose to revise after school, because that's what you believe is rational and it's the best decision you can make, then what you miss out on, which could be scrolling on TikTok or Instagram, that is what is described as your opportunity cost. It's the next best alternative if you choose not to revise. Question 2 asks us what are the 4 factors of production and to give one example of each. So we can list 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll go through them. So the first one is labor. Labor is what we call the workers in an economy. So if you go to a coffee shop, the people that are working there are labor. Or if you go to a construction site, the people that are building there are labor. So we could say construction workers. The next one is land. So land is pretty much just the area that we are choosing to produce goods on, or the area that we use to make our products. So we could just say land could be, I don't know, we could call it the farmland that a farmer uses to graze sheep or to grow crops. The third factor of production is capital. So what capital refers to is machinery that we have that can be used to produce goods. So for example, this could be, let's say, a sewing machine could help to produce clothes and things like that. And the last one is enterprise. This one's sort of tricky. We don't really use it that much in exam questions, but it's important to know it in case you do need to. And what enterprise is pretty much the entrepreneurial skills of the person that might be the owner of the business or something. So we could say the CEO who brings together all of the resources. And that is how you answer this question. Question 3 asks us to explain the difference between a movement along and a shift of the demand curve. So let's start with a movement along the demand curve. Say this is our diagram, that's price, that is quantity. This would be our supply curve and this would be our demand curve, right? So if we look at a movement along the demand curve, it would be if there is a change in price of the good. So if let's say the suppliers can now all of a sudden produce more for the same amount, for the same price as they were before, and the S1 now becomes S2. Say they can now produce more because it's cheaper resources for them. We could say that we have moved along our demand curve because first our equilibrium was here, equilibrium 1, but then because of a change in supply because of price, it's at this point on the demand curve. So we've moved along the demand curve without actually moving the demand curve itself. And if we looked at a shift of the demand curve, that would be because of something that is non-price related. So something that genuinely increases or decreases demand. So let's say there is a great new advert for this product, and now because of that, a lot more people want to buy the product. It's the same price, but there's greater demand for it. So we'd go from demand 1 to demand 2, and that would be a shift of the demand curve as opposed to a movement along the demand curve in the first one. So that is how I answer this question. Question 4 asks us to state 2 factors that could cause demand for electric cars to increase. So for one, we could say anything that would change the quantity demanded that could increase it. We could write that for this question. So we could say a decrease in price, which could be because of, let's say, a subsidy from the government to companies that produce electric cars. Because if they are cheaper, then the amount demanded or the quantity demanded would increase, and that could be a factor that causes the increase in demand for electric cars. The second one could be, let's say, greater awareness of the environmental impact of non-electric cars. So let's say the government now puts out adverts or puts out information that shows the effect of non-electric cars on the environment, and if people now see how much of an issue it is, they may be more inclined to buying a electric car, and that would increase the quantity demanded for electric cars. So that is how I answer this question. Question 5 asks us what is meant by market equilibrium. So if you drew a diagram, it'd be easier for us to see this. You have price here and quantity here, and that is your supply curve, and that is your demand curve. Equilibrium is just any market where there is no excess demand or supplies. As you can see here, the market is at P1, that's the equilibrium price, and at this price there is neither excess supply or demand, and that means that everyone in the market is happy to be purchasing the amount that they are, and there aren't, for example, way more product than is wanted, or there isn't way more demand than there is supply for, and that is how you answer this question. The next question tells us to draw a demand and supply diagram for ice creams on a summer day, and asks us to show what happens if the temperature rises sharply. So let's look at the first part of the question first. If we draw a demand and supply diagram for ice creams on a summer day, we'd have price here and quantity here. Our supply for ice creams will look something like this, and our demand for ice creams will look something like this. And so if we were to look at this, we could see that we are at equilibrium here, which means, as we discussed in the last question, there's neither excess supply or demand. So everyone in the market, in the ice cream market, is happy to be buying the amount of ice cream that they are. But then the next part of the question tells us to show what happens if the temperature rises sharply. So if the temperature increases, maybe more people will be wanting to buy ice cream, and therefore the demand for ice cream would go up. So our demand would shift to the right. So the demand for ice cream, number 2, the second demand, it would be an increase from our original demand because now more people are wanting ice cream, but the supply stays the same. There can't automatically become more ice cream vans there. The supply of ice cream will be the same, but because of the increase in demand, there will now be greater quantity sold of ice cream, so quantity 2, which is greater than quantity 1, and the price 2 will be higher than price 1. The new price will be higher than the original price for ice cream, which means that the ice cream vans can charge more for the same ice cream because there's greater demand for it. And that is how you answer this question. The next question tells us to draw a demand and supply diagram for the impact of a subsidy on solar panels. First of all, if you know what a subsidy is, it could help us answer this question. A subsidy, we can say, is a financial grant from the government to increase production of a specific good paid to suppliers, meaning the subsidies paid to the suppliers. So if you were to draw a diagram for this, we would have the original market, which would have price, quantity, and the supply of solar panels is that, and the demand for solar panels would look something like this. But now we're told that there's a government subsidy on solar panels, which means there is money given to the companies producing this, and that would shift their supply to the right because they're now willing to supply more solar panels for the same price because they are getting a greater amount of money to produce these from the government so that it's not as expensive to the consumers, but the companies can still afford to be making these solar panels. So this would change the supply to around here. So we could say solar panel supply 2, and the original price and quantity would be here. So quantity 1 of solar panels and price 1 of solar panels. But now because of the subsidy, the quantity will have increased now by this much, and it's now Q2, and our price we can see is lower at P2, which is lower than P1. So what this means is that consumers can now get solar panels for less, and there are more solar panels being put into the economy, which is what the aim of the government subsidy was. So that is how I answer this question. The next question tells us to use a demand and supply diagram to show what happens to house prices if interest rates fall. So a demand and supply diagram, we look at originally, the market would look like this, with this being our supply of houses and this being our demand for houses. So if interest rates fall, what this means is that the cost of borrowing would decrease as people have to pay back less on top of what they borrowed. So say if interest rates were 3%, for every £100 you borrowed, you'd have to pay back £103. But say interest rates drop to 1%, for every £100 you borrowed, you don't have to pay back £101. So what this means is that people that are going to buy a house on mortgage or are planning to buy a house on mortgage now may be able to find better deals, whereas they pay less interest rates. So maybe long term they feel the house is a better investment or a better thing to buy as they're not paying back as much in interest. So because of this, the demand for houses would increase as more people find it feasible to buy a house, and our demand would change from demand 1 to demand 2. But people wanting more houses doesn't automatically just make new houses appear. The supply for houses will stay the same. So we'll go from here, which was the original price and the original quantity of houses sold at the original price, to this new amount, so this quantity of houses, as opposed to Q1, Q2 is now being sold, which is greater than the original amount because there are more suppliers willing to sell at this higher price at P2, which we can see is higher than P1. So because of the fall in interest rates, we can see that the demand for houses has increased, and therefore the prices for houses have also increased. And that is how I answer this question. Thank you guys for watching this economics video. We hope you found it useful. Please let us know in the comments if there are any topics you want us to cover in the future.